Hey ladies, got a struggle? Need to vent? It's time to join your voice and get down to business with some critical thought, where like-minded ladies share their personal experiences to empower each other, using critical thinking to make wise decisions. And now, here's your host, Lady C.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Struggles of Jehovah's Witness Women. This is Lady C, and we have on the line with us today JT and the individual that we'll be interviewing, Becca. Becca, we are so happy to have you on our program today, and the focus on this interview is talking about not being a Watchtower poster child. Becca, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lady C. I'm glad to be on the program. Thank you, JT.
You're welcome.
Becca, how long were you affiliated with the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Well, I was actually born into the organization. My mom was baptized long before I was born, so I grew up in it. And I was in it until I was about 18 years old, and then I left, and I went back to it around 20, actually. And then I left it officially and didn't go back about 23.
Okay. So you were born in, and you left at about 18. Is there any particular reason why you left?
I think at that time I still was a little bit confused as to whether this was the truth or not, but I didn't like the way I was being treated. I didn't really have a good connection with any of the people my age in my congregation, and there were a lot of things doctrine-wise that weren't clicking for me. So I decided to go into the world at that time and give it a try, and probably wasn't mentally and emotionally prepared for it at the time, but that's what I decided to do.
Now, I remember when we had spoken before, you had talked about your life growing up in the organization. What was it like? What type of restrictions did your parents have on you as a Jehovah's Witness child?
Well, my mom was a Jehovah's Witness, and my dad was not. So I had two sort of different sets of rules to abide by, and at the time, my mom being married to an unbelieving man, it causes a lot of contention in the household. So I had my father who hated Jehovah's Witnesses, and then my mother who sort of didn't want me to associate with anyone but Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's obviously a very typical attitude to have. So I wasn't really allowed to have friends in general. So I had a pretty lonely childhood. I wasn't allowed to associate with worldly kids outside of school, and I wasn't really allowed to do anything with Jehovah's Witness kids because my dad was pretty opposed to that. So here and there, I would associate, with people, but altogether not really so much. And then within the congregation, we moved quite a bit, and I was more of a rebellious child. So I saw the side of the organization that a lot of people, don't see, which is just being pulled into elders meetings and having judicial committees, and those are pretty traumatic experiences, that stick with you for life mostly, and you see another side of it, I think until when you're not in that type of a meeting and you don't see that they have their own set of rules and their own, judicial system sort of, you don't really understand fully the impact and the magnitude of an organization like that. So I think it was a blessing in disguise for me to go through that multiple times at a young age.
So then when you left the organization, what was your life like? What happened? What were your experiences?
Well, I reconnected with an old friend from my childhood, and then I also was just enrolling in cosmetology school at the time to be a hairdresser. So when I went into school and I made friends, and I sort of started associating with people that I didn't really know any better at the time, but I did know that they like to go out and party, but it seemed like that's sort of what everyone was doing. And slowly but surely, I started hanging out with people who weren't doing the best things with their lives. They were doing drugs, and they were very reckless with their lives. So after about 3 months, I would say, in cosmetology school, I started cosmetology school as with Watchtowers in my trunk and a regular Pioneer, trying to still get my 90 hours a month. And then that's what I was trying to do, And then just within a couple months, I really bonded with some people, some good, some not so good. And I thought, that's it. I'm just not gonna go back to the meetings anymore. And I was very busy at the time, working and going to school. So I just sort of already had certain doubts in my head, and then I just started filling my time with other things. And the more time that went by, I noticed that I was just on a really, really not so good path, and my friends were people who, like I said, they like to do drugs, and they, by association, I started to do drugs. We would go to music festivals and a lot of parties, and the things that I saw at that time were pretty rough. I had a couple people I knew that overdosed on drugs, and their bodies were found in the parks the next day. These were things I was never exposed to as a kid. And, friends of mine, their boyfriends' homes were raided because they were selling drugs. And it was a lot of things that were pretty shocking to me. And at that time, I still, I had a lot of doubts about the organization, but I wasn't 100% certain that it wasn't the truth. Of course, I had feelings that, this is happening to me because I left the organization, and this is just how the world is, and I'm being punished. I'm being punished for leaving. So during that time, it was difficult because my mother and sister stopped talking to me, and a lot of the people, all the people I knew that I grew up with, they decided that I was, I guess, not an apostate at the time, but just, that I was a rebellious person. So, they one or two times tried to reach out to me and get me to come back to the meetings, and then just would look the other way if they saw me around town. So going through all of that, and just sort of, I felt like I was spiraling downward, I guess, at that time.
So what was your turning point?
I felt like I hit rock bottom at a point in my life where I had a couple of friends that sort of betrayed me, and I thought they were my good friends. I had a guy that I was with at the time, and one of my really good friends, she was with him, and I found out, and so that sort of made me realize these people aren't my friends, and I did have a couple of good friends outside of the organization, so I started to clean up my life, she's the one who sort of sat me down and said, please don't do drugs, and, I understand, your life is hard, but just don't go down that path, and I was like a loaded spring, and I just did all of these things that I definitely was regretting at the time. So the only choice for me at the time was to go back to the organization because I wanted some comfort and I didn't trust myself enough. So I thought I just have to go right back to the organization, and that's what I did. And of course they welcomed me back with open arms, and it's like, nothing happened, it's like you just come back and, your mom and sister who didn't speak to you for a couple of years it's like nothing happened, you're just back. So then I started to attend meetings again and sort of, was living a double life, I guess, for a while. But then I think at the time I was very, very, very depressed, and I guess I thought I had no other choice, so I just made a decision to have my family over my freedom and my happiness. So I started to study again. I started to attend meetings, pretty regularly and go back out in field service. And I had a little bit of a different experience this time. It was a new congregation. And I met someone who was an elder son, and we ended up getting married. And he had a nice family. His dad was a nice guy. And I think being in that family dynamic, their family dynamic, was really attractive to me because I had a pretty messed up family growing up. So they sort of adopted me into their family, and it felt good to me. So we got married when I was 21 years old. And then during that time, there was just so many things started clicking for me. I couldn't stay in the religion any longer. So I had a decision to make, to leave it and stay married to my husband. And he was okay with it, but then certain things just shifted, and it was best for us to separate. So once we separated, I was in therapy, and I got to see from a more objective standpoint a lot of the decisions I made and how it was my responsibility. I had my own role, 100% was my role in making these choices and attracting certain situations to my life. So things started to make sense as far as doctrine went and just the way people are treated. I mean, the elders meetings, for instance, like I said, it's very traumatic for a young woman to be interviewed by four men that you don't know and ask a very, very personal questions. So I started to talk about these things and look at it from a different perspective and realize that it's not normal, it's not natural, it's not right. This is not the truth. So that was really helpful, that I was able to learn certain coping mechanisms, and not just either go and run to alcohol and drugs or go and run back to the organization. And I was 23, so at the time, it's a little harder to learn those things when you're 23 versus, learning them when you're young. But I'm glad that I took advantage of therapy, because I definitely had issues with depression and anxiety. So that kind of started my journey. It's been a rocky journey, but it started my journey into a really healthy life and recovery, I suppose.
Okay. So did you get disfellowshipped?
I never got disfellowshipped, no. I was publicly reproved. I was privately reproved, but I never got disfellowshipped.
So you went out into the world, and when you came back, did you tell them what you had been through?
Yeah, definitely. I did tell them, and I was in a new congregation, and I told them, and they definitely could have disfellowshipped me, but they didn't. I just entered into that congregation with no privileges or anything like that.
What transpired in your relationship that made you all leave each other?
So at that time, during my marriage, I took more of a lead spiritually in our family. He had a daughter, and I studied with her. And as I was reading and teaching her things, I realized how crazy it sounded. It just made me really think. I really hadn't taught somebody, and it felt like such a big responsibility to be doing that.
So basically, what we're looking at then is you're raised in a religion as a youngster, and you want to go out into the world because you don't realize, what you're getting ready to get into. But the point of the matter is, when you come back, you still think it's the truth.
Yeah. Well, I definitely was over the party side of, what the world had to offer. I knew I didn't want that. So, but then, I was in this completely opposite situation where I was a stepmom and a wife in the religion, as a Jehovah's Witness. So, those are completely different lives, and it happened very, very quickly. So, it was a really good time for me to take a step back and really think about things that I hadn't thought about, I never read anything that was contrary to Jehovah's Witnesses. Even when I left the organization the first time, I was still too indoctrinated to actually look up any articles or read any books that had anything to say about the actual root of the religion, how it came to be, and certain things that you won't learn reading the material that the society provides to you.
So you didn't have any concrete evidence that this wasn't the truth, but what I'm hearing you say is you're a teenager when you get baptized, you leave, you go out into the world, you're still young when you come back, and now you're married to this older man with a child, and now you're thrust with all these responsibilities to care for this child, and now you're looking at life and saying, what is this? So you're able to examine the teachings better.
Definitely, and especially being someone who had the responsibility of teaching the doctrine to someone else. I think I definitely was taking the information more seriously and trying to apply it to my life, and I had so many moments where it just wasn't connecting, and the answer I always got, if I ever spoke to my mom about it before or during this time, or if I ever spoke to my father-in-law, who was the presiding overseer of our congregation, I would always get the same answer, and that's just like, well, it needs to reach your heart. It's not in your heart, so you need to pray more, you need to read the Bible more. And when you get that kind of answer, you just think that there's something wrong with you. You don't have the critical thinking skills at the time. That's what a lot of different organizations and groups, they all do that to people at a certain point. You can't argue with that. You can't argue with someone saying that you just don't have enough faith, or the information is in your brain, but it's not connecting to your heart. So then you just go back and try to do some work on yourself. But I came to an impasse at a certain point with that. It's really hard when you're young to leave the organization, especially if you're doing it on your own. The main thing I'd like for people to know who are leaving, whatever age it is, it's very common to battle with anxiety and depression when you're leaving everything you've known, when you feel alone, and there's a lot of coping mechanisms that this world has to offer, and they may seem quick and easy, they may seem fun, they may fill you up for a little while and take the edge off of the pain, but then you're still left with everything, once that wears off. So finding a good group of people, a good group of friends, therapy, if you have access to it, is important, but actually looking into certain truths and facts that the society, presents and just researching those things, because you have to know that you're not just someone who has no faith, and you're not just a rebellious person, and sometimes you feel like you're in no man's land, that you're not, quote-unquote, bad enough for the world, but you're not good enough for the organization. Life is gray, and there's a lot of gray area. So I would like for people to know that. I read Crisis of Conscience. I read a book called Combating Cult Mind Control by Steve Hassan. Those two books really helped me to just take a step back and look at my experience and look at the reasons why I made choices that I did and take responsibility. I think critical thinking is a lot about that. Growing up in that religion, we don't get those skills. Everything is Satan's fault and everything is beyond your control. You can't control things. But in real life, you're the pilot. You have control of your life and your thoughts and your actions.
Wow, interesting experience. What happened to you is not unique or a one-off, and this is the reason why I do this. It's not to make light of what happened to you. It's not to disregard what happened to you, but it's to show that what happened to you is the result of an entire system that has been set up to get a certain result from its members, and that result is guilt, loneliness, depression. The entire system that is in place, it will generate these results. If you do A, you will be happy. If you do B, you will not. And so this is a system that's in place. It's known as the Jehovah's Witness denomination. It is how their religion runs. And the religion is, for all of us, we live on two types of rules. I can't stress this enough to people. We live on written rules, stuff that's actually in the magazine, somebody can show you on page 17, paragraph 4, and then we live in that culture. These are the unwritten rules, the unwritten cues as to what's acceptable, not acceptable, and the result is exactly the same because you will feel either bad or good or whatever. Now, one of the things that I tell people who are looking at leaving the organization, and this is what, in my personal observation and Lady C's observation, we have seen and we have personally dealt with. This is not something somebody told us, something we heard. This is what we have seen and personally dealt with in talking to people, in conversations, and having people here at our home. Sometimes because the organization is very restrictive, you made a point about becoming like a spring. The Great Teacher book, the old children book, Listen to the Great Teacher, there is a chapter where the society makes this statement, and it's a very true statement. I mean, I tell people all the time, society often writes some very good articles, but they also write some crazy stuff too, and the problem is you got to accept both of them. In the Great Teacher book, it talks about how children are like a spring. You can hold a spring so long that when you finally release it, it has lost all of its springiness. It's just nothing. Or you can let the spring go so fast that it will bounce out of your hand and just go off. And that's the way it is typically for Jehovah's Witness children. The organization puts a vice grip around us that crushes us. It crushes our spirit. It crushes our desires. It crushes our dreams. And so that's why you often see Jehovah's Witness children who don't even get baptized. They don't even do anything in the organization. You look at their lives, and their lives don't really reflect much. I mean, they don't do anything because everything's been crushed out of them. And then on the other hand, you have people who decide they're leaving. And when they leave, they're just like that spring. I'm free. I can do whatever I want to. Nobody can tell me what to do no more. Now, that's true. I mean, that's a valid point. That is a valid point. You can do what you want to do. The problem is for Jehovah's Witness kids is that too many times the witness child will gravitate toward the negative things when they leave. And that's where they become the Jehovah's Witness poster child. We're going to do an actual video on this, but this is a point that we wanted to make, and we was glad that you were able to talk to us because that was one of the things that you expressed when you spoke to Lady C, is that you realized that when you left the organization, you took a right-hand turn when you should have took a left-hand turn, and as a result, you don't want others to end up mess around and become a poster child. And what that basically means is you become the example that elders like myself used to use. I remember young people who had left the organization, and when they leave, they go out in the world, quote unquote, and they get involved in drugs, just wild life, just literally their life go to hell in a handbasket. I mean, everything that you can do that's wrong, the Jehovah's Witness child would find it. He would find it, and he would just be wallowing in it. I tell you, we've laughed about with other people how it's amazing how stuff that even quote unquote worldly kids wouldn't do. The Jehovah's Witness child, like, I can do it now. Yep. And so in their effort to express their freedom, they end up making decisions that come back and deal with a very difficult blow. And so, as you mentioned before, the witness child begins to think, well, man, it's because I left the Kingdom Hall, and so they end up going back. When in reality, it really had nothing to do with you leaving the Kingdom Hall. It really had to do with you chose the wrong friends when you left. Because remember, in the Kingdom Hall, we are never taught how to choose friends. We're never taught how to find a man or a woman to have a meaningful relationship with that we will marry. We're never taught that. We're given some basic criteria. These are your friends. Do they go to the Kingdom Hall regularly? Do they go in field service regularly? Do they come in at the meetings regularly? Well, if they do that, that person's a friend. And the same thing if you're looking to get married. Is the brother coming to the Kingdom Hall? Is the brother going out in field service? Does he comment, and are his comments real good comments too? Then he'll make a good husband. That's the basic criteria that Jehovah's Witness woman is given. So when she go out into the world, she's thinking, well, I ain't looking for nobody going in field service. I ain't looking for nobody coming at the meeting. So I don't know what to look for. And so the poor girl end up going for anybody. And because the organization is, and like most churches, you have this high female to male ratio. And so brothers begin to realize in the organization, I can pick and choose. And there's nothing wrong with it necessarily, when people get married or people of different ages. But in the organization, you will find typically that brothers will marry sisters much younger than them. And there's a number of reasons, because they can pretty much tell them what to do. They can you marry a sister who's your age or older, she's grown, she can tell you what to do. And so a lot of brothers, they'll marry younger sisters, and we've seen that. And that oftentimes for the sister, she'll look up and she'll say, well, he's a ministerial servant, he's an elder, so he's got to be a good husband. He got to be a good husband. And that don't necessarily mean it. We had a situation that we are very aware of an older man in the congregation. He had to be at least he was more than 65 because he retired. And he was walking around the Kingdom Hall asking sisters, when his wife passed in death, would they like to get married? He was just walking. I mean, he was literally walking around. And sister, you think about getting married? And a lot of the sisters were like, he's just crazy. This guy's crazy. But do you know there was a sister who said, yeah. And she was like our age. She was like almost 30-some years younger than this dude. And everybody was like, oh, my goodness. But she was lonely. I personally knew that she wanted to get married. She said she could not find a man. And here comes a man. He goes to the Kingdom Hall. He moves the books every weekend. He'll make a good husband. And so you see people get into relationships that are just difficult. My wife and I, we've seen that with people who even leave the organization. Couples who leave, sometimes they realize, we really didn't get together because we were so in love. We were just both out there as pioneers trying to move these products. And now we really don't have the same interests. And you see a lot of times former Jehovah's Witnesses, they end up going in separate ways. Because really when they started, their foundation was built on sand. And as a result, that's where they are. You mentioned about the judicial meetings. In the judicial meetings, and I'll tell people, it's very, very difficult for females. There is absolutely nothing that compares to what a female Jehovah's Witness woman will face in a judicial meeting. Even male Jehovah's Witnesses don't get this, especially if the issue is surrounding sexuality, sexual activity. Oh, my goodness. The questions that they will ask female Jehovah's Witnesses in regards to sex is off the chain. I mean, it's literally off the chain. Details that they want you to go into. In fact, we're going to do a video on my first judicial meeting as a young elder of what I was introduced to. I mean, it's just beyond comprehension many times. And these oftentimes are married men who know the physical and the mechanical aspects of sexuality, and they're asking questions like, I had no idea how this stuff works. You tell me, girl, how that stuff works. And so it's like that crazy stuff. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And I remember even at one of my elder schools, one of the speakers at this elder school, he was like, elders, y'all can't be asking these kind of questions. I mean, some of y'all ask questions like y'all ain't married, And so it's a problem. And here's the catch-22. This is the catch-22. If the sister fails to answer any of these questions, she will then be deemed as not being repentant. And it has resulted in a lot of sisters being disfellowshipped because they reached a point where they're like, you know what? I'm not answering that question. I'm not going to tell you all that kind of detail. I told you enough. I told you I slept with the man. What more you need to know? Right. And so as a result of that, the sister gets disfellowshipped because, well, she really wasn't cooperative. We was asking her some questions and she wouldn't answer them. And so I tell people, Jehovah's Witness, and because you don't get a chance to talk to people if you're a disfellowship or if you're counsel or discipline, nobody knows that the elders ask these kind of questions. I mean, it's amazing. And so this is the type of thing that happens to witnesses when they're exposed to having to go into a judicial meeting. And it involves sexuality, and oftentimes it's a young single sister and 3 old dudes, Mm-hmm. Combination in itself is just ripe for all kinds of problems, and it's very unfortunate. And that's why we tell people, when you leave, make sure that you make the right turn, not the left turn, so that you can go in the right direction. Because there's really no reason to leave the organization and then become a poster child where some elder will stand up on the platform and say, y'all remember young people we had a few years ago, they left, and now you saw them in the newspaper, they're being locked up. You don't have to do that. And it is amazing. You rarely see a Jehovah's Witness who leaves, and they go off to college, get a doctor's degree, and become a dentist, lawyer, whatever. They don't. They normally become something that even people in the world will look at and say, oh, man, your life is really in bad shape. And so these people end up having to drag themselves back to the Kingdom Hall on glass, and that's what they deal with. And so that was one of the things that my wife and we decided, we're not going to be nobody's poster child. Not going to be nobody's poster child. Mm-hmm. Look at us, they can be like, oh, they doing okay, but they need to come back to Jehovah's still, Mm-hmm. So I mean, you get that crazy stuff, Check this out. When we first left, because when you leave, they always start these rumors about you. Oh boy, they just denigrate your character. They had me, I'm an African American man, and they had me say, the word was, JT, he left Lady C for a white woman. I mean, just all kinds of crazy stuff, all kinds of crazy stuff. And so people would often see us on the street, and they're like, y'all still together. And then we would just be smiling, how y'all doing? How y'all doing today? Good to see you. And they'd be like, just lost. Because they expect to see you all beat down and run down and looking bad and all that kind of stuff. And we're like, no, we're not going down there. We're not going out like that. I tell you, we're not going out like that. Nobody else. If you leave the organization, as they say, the best revenge is success. And so when people see, because that's what, as a witness, you're taught that if you leave the organization, things will go wrong for you. And so if people see things going wrong for you, they say, well, see, that's why I won't be leaving, because I saw, these other people who left and their life just went so bad, I'm not going to ever leave. But because when I left, like the people that we run with who left the organization, please, they moving. I mean, they moving on. And so that's the whole thing that people need to understand. You don't have to go down the hill because you left the organization. I tell people, man, we were selling books. We worked for a book publishing company. They tricked us. We thought we was actually doing something for God. We believed if we moved Watchtower products, God was going to smile. God didn't care if we was moving Watchtower products or not. And so we believe that. I mean, every Jehovah's Witness believes if he's not moving Watchtower books, magazines, that God ain't smiling at him. God won't be happy if I don't move these pamphlets. That's ridiculous. And when you start talking to people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, they look at you like, now, JT, I know you didn't buy into that. I know you didn't believe that craziness. Yeah, man, I was brought up in that stuff, man. I couldn't help it. I was brought up to believe that crazy stuff. So I tell people, take your time. You leave the organization. Start building you a new clientele of friends. In fact, the first thing that you can do, call up all your non-witness family. Call every single one you can find and let them know I had to get out of there. And you will find they will welcome you with open arms. Call up all your coworkers. The coworkers used to ask you, hey, you want to go bowling on Thursday night? Let them know. Y'all guys still going bowling? I want to go this week with y'all. The way the organization is structured, it is structured so that you will be lonely. It is the goal of the organization that if you leave us, you are going to be lonely and need us. Well, you let the organization know, look, man, I got to roll. I got some more friends I can hang with. But the problem is finding the right friends. Because, see, we were never taught how to build relationship with anyone beyond people who move Watchtower products. And so we have a whole new skill that we have to develop, how to evaluate people, as individuals. One of the things Ray Franz said in his book, when I read it, I said, man, this is so powerful. He said for the first time in his life, and Ray Franz had been a witness all his life, did everything in the organization a person could possibly think of, around from pioneering, governing body, everything. Okay, he made the point, he says, for the first time in my life, I can meet a person and evaluate that person on his own merit. Is he a good person? Is he a kind person? Is he a thoughtful person? Is he hateful? Is he not worth giving the time of day to? I can now evaluate people based on that, not on the fact whether or not they move and Watchtower products. Right. And that's why when people become inactive or people slow down in the organization, they get dismissed. I mean, I think of all these district overseers that the organization just kicked to the curb. They fired all these guys, told them, go home and get a job. Turn the car keys in and get out of the apartment and find somewhere to live. And get your own insurance as well while you're working at it. And so these guys have been out there in the organization 30, 40 years being taken care of, and all of a sudden overnight they told them to go home and get a job. Even the Catholic Church has a place for nuns and priests when they retire. Watchtower don't have nothing for its most loyal people. The Bethelites and the circuit overseers and district overseers, these guys represent the most loyal people to the organization. They gave up families. They gave up children. They gave up careers. And as we're going to do in the vow of poverty, we're going to see how they gave up Social Security to live in the United States. So the organization, will give you that cold hand of steel and that velvet glove when you cross it. I mean, you will see it. You will feel it. But there are things that we can do, and I think that what you are doing and what other people are doing by telling your story, we help people to see you don't have to do it this way. You can do it that way, and you can be successful. And that's really what it's all about. I tell everybody has a story. And the reason why is because we fed from the same trough. We ate the same food, and it impacted us in making decisions the same way. I think about all the talented young Jehovah's Witness kids who could be doctors and lawyers and scientists and stuff. And many of these kids wanted to do these things. I worked with a guy, he wanted to play baseball. He said, JT, I don't know if I would ever made it to the pros or not, but I could have got a scholarship. The coach came over to my house, sat down with my mom and said, your son got a gift. He can play ball. He can go to college. If he can't play pro, at least he'll get his degree for free. Well, the ends coming and bodily training only beneficial for a little bit, not much. He ain't going to be playing no ball in school. And so now this guy, he's a grown man. Now his mama getting old, and then she need help, and then she got to turn to him to get that help. And now financially, where he could have been further along the way to be able to help his mama even more so, now, because he didn't get a lot of job opportunities and college opportunities, now he has less to help his mama. Now that she's old and sick, and the society won't help her. Congregations do not help old Jehovah's Witnesses. Rarely will they help them. They will tell them, you got any kids, Sister Jones? You better call your kids up. But I ain't talked to my kid in 22 years, but that don't matter. Call him up anyway. He's supposed to help you out. He's your son. Crazy. Mm-hmm. And we know people who are going through that. They get calls from their mama and daddy. They're 80 years of age, 70 years old. And the congregation told him, go talk to your son who's been in this fellowship 30 years ago. And it's sad. It's really sad. But I tell you, we're so glad that we were able to get you on. We know time is valuable and people don't have a lot of time, but we thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and what you've gone through and how important it is to let people know you came out a survivor. You came out a survivor.
If you just want to stay miserable, just stay in the organization, be miserable. Otherwise, you have this opportunity at a new life, and do the things that you never thought you could.
And what are you doing now?
Now I'm so I will be going to college. I will be going to school in the spring, just to take classes. I need to just get my feet back in it. It's been a while, but so I actually have a pretty successful sales job, outside sales, and in my spare time, I have a very interesting group of friends, and we're political activists. So I do a lot of activism work, and that's really where my passion is. And right now, there's really no better time. So I'm able to focus my energies on trying to, make this world a better place if I can. So that's something, I was never allowed to have an opinion on, is politics. And I always had a strong opinion on it. So now I can not only have that opinion, but I've learned so much. I've learned so much, and I'm able to be around people who are like-minded and make some really good friends and feel like I'm making a difference in the world, advocating for people and standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves.
Mhm. What is the relationship with your mother and your sister right now?
I'm not very close to my sister. She's not a witness anymore, but I'm not very close with her. My mother, she is still a witness, and we have a decent relationship. We've overcome quite a bit of things, but she does understand a little bit where I'm coming from now. But she's not really allowed to be close to me, so it's sort of.
Are you disfellowship?
I'm not disfellowship, so she can talk to me, but just having a close relationship with me is definitely frowned upon, and she takes it very seriously. So.
What about your father?
Yeah, we're not close at all. So I speak to him once in a great while, but not very close.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. Let me say this, and this way you won't. Just think about this. We see this a lot. I mean, I personally have a cousin. She got pregnant at 14, 15 years old. Her father was told he could choose between keeping his daughter in the house or basically maintaining his ministerial servant position with the possibility of being an elder. You know which one he chose? You guessed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he put my cousin out on the streets of New York City. Mm. And during this time, the laws weren't as good for minors as it is today. So he put her out on the street. She was like 14, 15 years old. She ended up moving in with people that she didn't really know. As a result, my cousin's life has been just so devastating. I mean, just the drugs, the men, just the entire gamut. My cousin now is 57 years old. I spoke to my cousin just a few months ago. This happened when she was 15. She's 57, 56 years old right now. And she is angry today as she was the day her parents put her out. And I've tried to explain to her, you need to understand how this religion works, and she doesn't want it to be explained to her. She just don't want to hear it. And so to this very day, her parents are almost 80 years old. They're about ready to die, and she is still as mad. I mean, she literally hung the phone up on me. I was like, come on now. I'm trying to help you out. And it's because she has failed to take the opportunity to understand what she was a part of. I say all this to make the point that it's very unfortunate that our parents were either in this cult or touched by this cult. In the case of your father was touched by this cult, and it messed up his family, messed up his marriage, it messed up his children, and it has created a wedge between you and your father. Your mother, like you said, you're not even disfellowship, and she is treating you as if you are, because this religion has told her. This past summer assembly, Jehovah's Witnesses were given instructions that basically said, even folks who don't even come to the meeting like they should, we need to keep an eye on them like we would an apostate almost. Okay? So,
yeah, I read that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's all code words. Same thing. You know, they can dress that monkey up any way they want to, but it's basically the same thing. If you're not coming to the meeting, you know, you're out there on the other end. You're on Satan's side. I'm going to watch you carefully and keep my distance from you. So, and the organization has to do this because more and more people are talking. More and more people are fading and being able to talk to their families. So the society got to lock down their program. And I understand that. You know, it's a business. You got to protect your business. Come on now. The problem is their business involves our family and our loved ones. That's what makes it hurt so bad. So I tell people, one of the things, once you come to realize this is not the truth, one of the most difficult things you've got to come to grips with is that there is a possibility, and it is a very strong possibility, that you will never have a relationship with your family and your parents. And I tell people this so that they can mentally brace themselves, they can mentally adjust themselves. Now, if down the road your mom comes running back with both arms open, baby, I love you, I'm glad we out of this thing, that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But most people need to brace themselves in case that doesn't happen. And that's what we find as we deal with people. They're not prepared for what happens if mama or daddy never comes back and says, I love you. And that becomes the mental part that results in so many formal witnesses having to seek out professional help. They have to get help, because you mentally cannot carry this thing around by yourself. You got to talk to somebody, professional, good friend, whatever. You got to get it out. And we see the damage that this thing does to people. That is probably the society's absolute best tool. Take your family from you. I mean, that is their best ace in the hole. And if you saw that video this summer of the young girl who left, I was telling my wife, I said, can you imagine when that girl was calling home, and they wouldn't answer the phone, and she was standing on a ledge, and when that phone didn't pick up, she jumped off. Can you imagine that? And that's the whole point. You know, the organization is pushing people to their limit, and they don't care. They don't care. And people need to understand that. This organization, you will not come first in this organization. Individuals do not come first. Jesus said, if a man has 100 sheep, he's going to go and find the lost sheep. If one gets lost, he's going and find it. He cared about individuals. The organization cares about the organization. And if you violate across the organization, you will find out that your individual thoughts and views don't mean jack. And that's what happens to people. And so people need to understand. I can't stress this to people enough. This ain't no joke. This religion is serious. This is no joke. This religion is messing with people's lives, and people need to understand this. And that's why, our approach to our online forum is so serious. I love to cut the food and act up, but this stuff, man, is serious. I mean, there are some people out there who are right on the very edge, literally on the edge. All they need is a little finger, and they're over the edge, and they're going to take their lives. And so anything that you can do or I can do that can make a person stop and take a step back and ask some critical thinking questions is very important. I find that once people come to understand that we just got duped. We got duped. We got hoodwinked and bamboozled. They got us selling books, and we thought it was for God. And so they really duped us. And that's why you see a lot of witnesses online where they mad. You see some of these videos, these folks is mad, and I can understand that, because that's your initial response. But I tell people, you have to reach the point where you know what, they're not going to win. I'm going to take these lemons and I'm going to turn it into lemonade, and we all can do that. You've done it. You've seen others do it. And you and I and others, we can help other people to do the same thing. Let's take these lemons we got, put some sugar on it, throw some water and some ice, and we're good to go. Good to go. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I tell you, I really enjoyed it.
Yes, you too. Agreed. I agree. Let's make lemonade.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, yes, thank you so much, Becca. We really appreciate the interview with you. And we appreciate those of you in the listening audience. We hope that you'll be able to take this information to heart and not be a Watchtower poster child. This has been Lady C with the struggles of Jehovah's Witness women.
If you've been in the struggle and want to appear as a guest on our show, email us at info@criticalthinker101.com. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Critical Thinkers.